Our first presenter, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Korsunsky.
Good morning, all. My name is Dave Korsunsky, based in San Francisco, California. My company is Heads Up Health. We make analytics software to help people manage all of their health records, all of the data that they're collecting on their health journey. And the topic today will be the key biomarkers that you want to keep an eye on as you approach ketogenic diet, or actually any major health intervention for that matter. And really what it's about is learning how to become your own detective and learning how to take control of the health data that you already have, but that is fragmented out there in different doctors' offices, paper records. That information is incredibly valuable, and what we'll talk about today is what are the most important pieces of information, how to get it all into your own hands, and then how to put that information to work to help you achieve your goals. So I'll talk a little bit about myself, how I ended up here, a little bit about my company, and we'll talk about how to use information, how to use data on our keto journey. And in my opinion, this information is life and death. For a lot of people on our system, it is life and death, and we'll talk about why that's the case. We'll go into some of the very specific metrics that I think everyone should be keeping an eye on, and we'll talk a little bit about how to apply Heads Up Health to manage this data yourself, and then we'll leave time for questions. So I first got into health analytics for my own personal curiosity. I think it was an article in the SF Gate newspaper where Dave Asprey was wearing a Zeo device on his head and tracking different sleep states, and I just got really enchanted with that idea. And for a lot of years, I was doing a lot of biohacking, really just looking to optimize my own personal performance. At that time, I was also working for a company called VMware, and I was working with some of the largest health record software companies in the world, companies like Epic, Cerner, McKesson, and these companies make software that controls the largest hospitals in the world. Duke, Stanford, UCSF. These systems cost hundreds of millions of dollars to implement, and they are ultimately the systems that store all of our vital medical records. I had my own health issue in 2012, and it was actually because I had taken the time to collect all of my own data that I was able to very quickly start working with different experts and give them access to my health records that allowed them to very quickly make a diagnosis and help me get back on track. And that really is what inspired me to keep building this. And then I worked at a company called Cloud Physics, which is a data analytics company that is collecting and processing over 80 billion data points per day. And that's a lot. And I got to see what's possible when you have really smart and talented data scientists and you have a lot of data that can be mined. And what we're trying to do is apply. Sure, here, yeah. What we're trying to do is apply that same logic to health data and apply data science and analytics to help people understand their health in new ways. And then I went down the entrepreneurial path, which means I am a borderline psychopath because we dive headfirst into these entrepreneurial ventures without much thought to where we're going and how we're going to get there, and I'm in the midst of that now. So these are the forces at work pushing back against us on our health. We have industry that is engineering foods that are hyperpalatable and that understand the neuroscience of the reward-seeking behaviors in our brain and engineer food products that cause us to eat as much as we can and override our abilities to say when we want to stop. And so we have these forces of industry at work. We have cultural and socioeconomic forces at work where not everyone is able to walk into Whole Foods and get food at $80 a bag, and yet these people need access to this type of food. We have forces from genetics and epigenetics and even psychospiritual things, issues and experiences in our early formative years that now affect us emotionally and have a huge impact on our ability to self-regulate and to make food choices and to manage our health. These are very difficult forces to work with. Family, career, environment, and then information and misinformation. I was just watching a talk by Dr. Fetke at CrossFit and reading some of the comments between the vegan community and the keto community, and there's so much intensity and so much information flying around. How does the average person know even where to start? And so this is what we face as we try to manage our health. And so one tool that we can put to work for us to help us cut through all of the noise is data. And it's data that we can measure from our own body, and it can tell us if we're on the right track or not. And for many people, this data is life or death. We have users in Heads Up Health that are tracking things like the glucose ketone index to keep cancer in remission, and very carefully tracking medication levels to control seizures. And if we do come down with a very serious diagnosis, how can we get our medical history to the right professional, like Dr. Gannett, as soon as possible, who spoke on Friday, to instantly have access to our medical history? Moving away from conventional medicine, we don't just show up at the conventional MD and get the instruction manual for keto. It doesn't exist. We're all self-managing, and so we need tools to help us provide this information to the health experts that can give us advice on keto and on other modalities. The cost of health insurance, over $1,000 a month right now for the average deductible in the US. Many people simply can't afford that. A lot of people are turning towards self-management just because the cost is getting unaffordable. What's more, if you're on a keto diet and you're self-managing and doing these interventions yourself, you're paying $1,000 for a doctor who can't even really counsel you on the nutritional interventions you've chosen. So these are some of the reasons we need the data as we go down this path. So some of the markers I'll talk about today, there's thousands of them out there, but I've selected a few that I think are the most important, and let's get into it. So I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone here about the importance of tracking blood sugar. And this is probably one of the most helpful pieces of information we can collect. I've been on keto for 18 months. I've tracked my fasting blood sugar every morning. It's probably the single most important metric I use. I can test in the morning and get a very good sense of how I did the day before on my carbohydrate intake, on my exercise levels, and if I had to pick one metric of all of the thousands that I see people tracking in our software, this is the most important one for me. I get the most value out of it. So fasting blood sugar, and then postprandial blood sugar. The study that I've linked to here is one that was done where they actually hooked up 800 people to continuous glucose monitoring devices, which is just an incredible feat on its own. And they measured their blood glucose continuously for a week. And what they found was that everybody responded differently based on the exact same food and the exact same quantity. And on the graph here, you see two individual participants, 445 and 644, given a banana and cookies. One person ate the banana and saw their glucose go up, the other saw their glucose go down. So how do you respond to the banana? Actually, maybe you tolerate the banana just fine. In fact, there may be actually certain carbohydrate sources that you tolerate just fine. And that's what Rob Wolf talked about in his book, How to Do the 7-Day Carb Test. Eat a specific food, test your blood sugar 2 hours later. It's some of the most valuable information we can collect to fine-tune the food that we're using. Simple to get a glucometer, and there are continuous glucose monitors coming out that are going to become mainstream, where we'll be able to just wear something on our wrist that will be able to monitor blood glucose 24/7. It will be very easy for us to identify when a stressful event increases our blood sugar or when a specific food increases our blood sugar. Testing ketones, I found this to be one of the most important metrics during my early days on keto. It helped me understand what it took to get my body into ketosis, what things pushed me deeper into ketosis. There was huge differences even in the type of exercise I did and how that affected my level of ketosis. So I found this to be incredibly helpful. Historically, it's been cost prohibitive to test ketones, but what I've included here is if you are using the Precision Extra, you can get strips a little cheaper in Canada. You can also order them on eBay under the Abbott Freestyle name. And then new devices on the market like Keto Mojo are bringing out test strips for $1 per strip. And that's going to make this accessible to a lot more people. People who couldn't afford $4 a strip a few months ago can now start learning when their body is in ketosis and what it takes to get there. And then on the breath side, there's a new company out called Level that's building a reusable breath device, and then also the Ketonics. So a very helpful piece of data on this journey. Glucose ketone index developed by Dr. Thomas Seyfried in his work with cancer. In the 6,000 or 7,000 people we have on Heads Up Health, I'd say this is one of the most popular metrics. When we built it, we didn't think it would be that interesting, but all of our users who are using the ketogenic diet for cancer are tracking this marker. Additionally, people who are using it just for stubborn cases of diabetes and obesity. This actually looks at the ratio of glucose and ketones together. So you test both at the same time, and there's a calculation that gets done, and you look at the ratio, essentially, of the two numbers. And it just helps to make sure that both are staying in a very tightly defined range. And so there's a link there to the paper from Dr. Seyfried and how he uses this in brain cancer research. And then we've included in our own site ways to use this marker for other use cases. And then there's some reference ranges there. How many people actually have tracked glucose ketone index before or use it regularly? Anybody? Okay. So again, we're here at a conference about keto, but we're talking about sleep now. And actually, what does that have to do with ketosis? It has a lot to do with it, actually. The quality of our sleep, the quantity of our sleep, the circadian cycle of our sleep, when do we actually go to bed and when do we actually wake up, has a huge impact on our hunger hormones that help us control appetite. They have impacts on our cortisol levels. And even just a few days of sleep deprivation, less than 4 hours a night, can put someone who is not normally diabetic and have very severe symptoms of insulin resistance. And so I see people all the time who are trying keto, for example, and maybe not getting results. And then we look at their sleep data, and we realize that they're going to bed at 2 and getting up at 6, and it's just not enough to actually keep the body rested and to keep the hunger hormones in a proper level, keep cortisol down. So looking at sleep actually plays a huge part here. And then sleep apnea. If you're sleeping only a few hours a night and there's evidence of sleep apnea, that actually can make matters even worse. And so if you're not sure if you have sleep apnea, you can just ask the person sleeping next to you. And if it sounds like you're swallowing your tongue at various points throughout the night, chances are you're interrupting your sleep, sometimes multiple times per hour. I know my father got the sleep apnea test, and it's a diagnostic sleep study where you go into a lab and you get tested overnight, and they hook up these electrodes to your body, and they look at things like limb movement. You know, how are you fidgeting? Is your body jerking when you sleep? How many times are you waking up? And in my father's case, they actually just shut the whole test off after 1 hour. They said, we've never seen so many apnea events in 1 hour. We don't even need to complete the study, and sent him home. And this was something he'd had for 60 years. And there is evidence of metabolic syndrome, very tight correlations between metabolic syndrome and sleep apnea. So getting quality sleep, eliminating apnea, testing for it if you think there's an issue, noticing when you go to bed, when you get up. This is really easy stuff to track now. And what you see on the screen here is just my Fitbit device. And it monitors heart rate, and it does an incredible job telling me exactly when I go to bed, exactly when I get up, and it's cheap and it's affordable. So really simple and easy ways to start looking at some less obvious things that may actually be affecting your progress and that can actually be very easily corrected. Movement, basic movement. Again, you know, hey, I tried keto, it sucks, I didn't have any luck. Well, we'll take a look at the activity data, and this person is moving 2,000 or 3,000 steps per day, which is just not even basic movement levels. That's enough, a few trips to the refrigerator and back. So you find someone with poor quality sleep who's getting absolutely zero movement. They may be doing everything else right on keto, and they're not getting results because there are many other variables that we want to look at. Again, this is really simple stuff to track. In addition to just basic movement for weight loss, basic movement for mental health. And I think one of the best things we have for mental health is sweat. And so if you're on this journey and you're not getting even basic movement, basic sweat, basic cardiovascular activity, that's another really easy data point to collect, and that can make a huge impact on your progress. This one, the Bristol Score. Anyone heard of this one before? So why does this matter on keto? Well, in many cases, we are not getting enough fiber, or we are magnesium deficient. There is actually a study that was done called the Bristol Score that measures the transit time of food through the colon. And based on the transit time, we can make certain assessments about the health of our digestive tract. So there's actually a scoring system you can use, and a lot of talented functional medicine doctors will ask their clients to keep a journal and write down what did you eat, and then what was the Bristol score after you ate that food. And what those doctors are looking for is the health of the digestive tract and the health of the colon. This is simple. You know, the good news about this one is you don't have to buy a device or an app. You just have to look in the bowl. It is the simplest piece of biofeedback you can possibly collect, and yet extremely helpful. I can't tell you how many times I've had type 1 on keto. Many, many times. And again, simple to correct with fermented foods, lots of prebiotics. So if you haven't heard of this before, it's just a really simple way to check that your digestive tract is working properly, and then also understanding the correlation between what you're eating and then what the Bristol score would be for that certain food. So simple and easy to collect. Not physically collect, let's be clear about that, to monitor, okay? Body composition, again, this is something I think we're all very interested on keto, is just how has our body changed? I actually haven't lost a pound on keto, but where the actual mass is stored has completely changed. So if I was using pure scale weight, I would be very disappointed at this point in time. And so there's other ways to assess body composition. One is the muffin top pants. We all have them in our closet, and those are the ones where we put on and the muffin top comes out and hangs out over the side. That costs nothing to collect, but you can actually use those very easily to assess progress. Tape measurements is my second favorite. Again, looking at where the actual muscle mass is moving, a lot of people actually find they may put on a couple pounds as they go on to paleo or keto, but actually their clothes are fitting better and they start to look better. And so the way we track that is just using good old-fashioned tape measurement. Scales that can measure weight and body fat. I use a $49 Tanita scale. I've actually taken the scale to the lab where they do the DEXA scan and stepped on this $49 scale before I get this expensive DEXA scan, and the scale is right on. So this is an affordable model, I know it works, and then the gold standard is obviously DEXA scans, which are good to do semi-annually or annually. And then the last section is on the blood testing. And so we're making all of these changes in our lifestyle. We're changing diet and changing lifestyle, and what we want to know is, are my markers of health, my markers of disease actually improving? And this is where the rubber meets the road, and it looks at things like metabolic markers. Are those getting better as we go on this journey? Are the lipid panel numbers responding the way we want them to? Am I a hyper-responder or not? Everyone on keto should know the answer to that question. If you haven't, you can go get a basic lipid panel for free, sorry, not for free, on requestotest.com and test for yourself. So these are things, the blood work, that all of us should be keeping an eye on as we go down this path. And then also the functional medicine tests. When I went through my own health challenge, when I went to the conventional doctor, they ran a basic physical and nothing came up. And it wasn't until I found a good functional doctor who actually could run a stool test, find out that I had an infection in my GI tract, actually run a full thyroid panel instead of just TSH, and find out that I had a high reverse T3, which was suggestive of some metabolic issues. So it's very helpful to actually have a functional or naturopathic professional on the team who can start to run some of the non-standard tests. And they're going to double-click a few levels below the surface and really help you dig deep and find things like infections in the gut, markers of stress that don't show up in conventional labs. And so those are good to have in the portfolio. And really learn how to connect the dots between the lifestyle choices you're making and the blood work. I think everyone should be able to make those connections. So that sounds great, but it's actually really hard. And why is that so hard? First of all, every time you change doctors, you end up with another fragment of your medical history. In my case, I have 4 different patient portals in the San Francisco Bay Area. Each one of those has a different piece of my health history. I have information in PDF files, information in paper records. We are changing doctors and changing insurance plans more frequently. I don't even get health advice from a conventional doctor. I use a functional doctor. They have no access to the data stored in the conventional systems. So how do I get my medical records to someone like Allison Gannett or to Justin Marcagiani, my functional doc? They're locked away in these systems, and yet that is the most important information we can possibly collect on this path. And uncooperative, a lot of the times, conventional doctors can't order the tests we want. And a great example is, again, going back to my father, he was about to be put on statins recently, and we asked the doctor, 3 doctors actually, to run a fasting insulin test because we wanted to see if there were correlations with metabolic dysfunction, and none of them would do it. There was no billable code to run that test. And so we just went and ordered it ourselves on requesttest.com. It was $49. And sure enough, it provided a very helpful piece of information. So for those of you who are on keto for a chronic condition or an acute condition, having access to the lab testing is very important. We've got some information on our blog that was written by Amy Berger, and what we looked at specifically with this series is how does someone on a low-carb diet need to interpret their lab tests differently from someone who is not on a low-carb diet. It turns out that there are certain subtleties and certain nuances for the low-carb people when you're looking at traditional lab test values like hemoglobin A1C, and so we've got some information there. My functional medicine doctor has a product on his website. It's $360. It has pretty much every lab test you could ever need to order for yourself, and you can just pay out of pocket. That's less than half of a cost of my monthly deductible. I don't have to go and convince my doctor why I need all of these tests. So just doing cash pay sometimes is the easiest way to go. This is a list from Dave Feldman that he recently published on his recommended lab tests. Again, semi-annually or more or less depending on the need, and just being able to go online and order them yourselves. Sometimes that's just the fastest and the easiest way to get access to this very valuable data. My company actually provides a way to integrate all of this information in one place. So what I built was a system to help people manage all of this information, integrate all of your blood test data, so that you can show up to any doctor anywhere in the world tomorrow, and they have access to your entire history, even if they've never seen you or spoken to you before. I believe that's how health data should work, but unfortunately that's just not the case. So we're working on a software program that helps integrate health data, blood ketone readings, weight readings, blood sugar readings, any piece of health data you need to have at your fingertips as you go down this path is integrated into our system. It turns out that most of our users are on low-carb ketogenic diets because most of these individuals are self-managing, and they're using a lot of data on the journey, everything from macronutrients to body composition to blood work, and so we need ways to track all of this information. So that's what I'm working on, and lastly, I'll just talk about the things we can't measure, and arguably these are the most important things. There are currently no devices or apps to measure this stuff: love, community, fun, and a shout out to the Dry Farm Wine guys for bringing booze back to the keto community. Bring in the fun. Time outdoors and spiritual fitness, working on our spiritual fitness as much as we work on other aspects of our physical health, and gratitude. And with gratitude, I'd like to pay a note of gratitude to Brian and to Jimmy. Both of them have been big believers in my company. They've been big supporters. They've put on this incredible event. They put out amazing information that helps us all improve our health. So a huge debt of gratitude to those guys and to everyone here for taking the time to come out and listen. So just in summary, I think everyone needs to have access to all of their medical data, all of the data they're collecting. These are the only ways we can protect ourselves from the forces out there. Environmental toxins, food companies driven by profit rather than the glycemic load of the food. This really, onus is on us, really, to protect ourselves. No one else is going to do it. A doctor will help you if you're sick, but it really comes back to us. If you don't have access to all of your health data now, call your doctors and get access to it and get it organized. Under US law, they have to provide you your records in 30 days or less upon request. That is a federal law. Become your own detective. Get all of that information together so that you can spot the trends, that you can provide it to any doctor at a moment's notice. When necessary, run your own labs. Always be digging deeper. If there's tests you hear about, you think that may be a clue that could provide you some information, do it. Add a good functional or naturopathic doctor to your team. And as I talked about today, your health is a mosaic. You may hit a stall and it's because of sleep apnea, or because you're not getting a basic level of movement, or you have an infection in your GI tract. These are things we would not necessarily correlate with a stall in our health progress. So it's really looking at it as a mosaic rather than just specific pieces. And with that, I will say thank you, and I'd love to take questions. Thank you.
You said that you had a 2012 health issue, and how did you use your own testing, and what was it to manage that or get over that?
Yeah, great question. What I did was I called all of my old doctors. I had one option, go to the conventional doctor and get a prescription. And the other option was to explore alternative scenarios. I'd lived in, I think, 3 different cities. I called 4 different doctors. One of the doctors sent me a stack of papers, which had blood test data on it. Another doctor sent me my health history on a burned CD. And it was a PDF, and the PDF was password protected, and they wrote the password on the CD with a Sharpie. Now that's some of the ancient technology that we're dealing with. But I took every lab test, every blood test I could find, and I put it in a spreadsheet. Because when you have data in spreadsheets, how do you look at 4 different cholesterol tests over a course of 10 years when they're all in different PDF files? It's just a pain in the ass. It's very, very difficult. So I took all of that data and put it in a spreadsheet so I could see the trends. Even though my doctor couldn't see the trends, he only had the data in that system. I had it all in there. And every time I got a new test, I put it in there. And then I took that spreadsheet and I found a functional medicine doctor. He's based here in Austin, Texas. And I emailed him the spreadsheet. And he'd never worked with me before. And I said, this is everything you need to know about me. My blood sugar readings, my blood test values. And he used the spreadsheet and he designed a protocol and ran some tests. And every 3 months, we would meet on Skype and we would screen share and we would bring up the spreadsheet and we would check if the protocol, the supplement protocol and the lifestyle protocol was impacting the clinical markers that we needed to impact. And that was how I fixed it. And so that was what inspired me to say, wow, when I have all of this data, I can call a doctor in Texas and in seconds give him access to my history. So that's how I did it, was just getting all the data together.
About paying for these tests.
Yes.
I have a health savings account that's got money sitting in it, and I was just wondering, do you know if you can use that for these tests, or does it really have to be out of pocket?
Unlikely. I think it would more than likely have to be out of pocket. But you can check, actually. If you want to talk to me afterwards, we put out a blog post with a number of different direct-to-consumer labs. There's lots of options out there besides the one I mentioned. So there may be some that provide those options. I'm not 100% sure, but we
Okay.
could talk about it after.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm trying to figure out how chronometers data could be imported into your system.
Thermometer?
Chronometer?
Chronometer. That one, actually, we have not been able to integrate with. They do not have what's called a API, which means we can't link our software to their software. So what we are working on is a way to import that data through a CSV file, which means in Chronometer, you just export the data, weekly or monthly, and then we will automatically import it. So that will unfortunately be a manual process. I've spoken with the team over there at Chronometer about an integration, and it's just not something that they offer right now, and I don't see it happening anytime soon, unfortunately.
And then from the doctor's point of view, is it free for my doctor? If I pull all this data together, is it free for my doctor to access it? I'm not understanding that part.
Yeah, so if you did create an account with Heads Up Health, one of the things you'd do is search for your medical facilities and then link them to your Heads Up Health account. So we would just basically be synchronizing with the data your doctor already has. Now, if you wanted to connect a new doctor, like a functional medicine or naturopathic doctor, to your Heads Up Health profile, that you could do. And they then would have access to that information stored in the other health systems.
Thank you.
I have 2 real quick questions. For those in Austin, who is your functional medicine doctor?
It's Dr. Justin Marcajani. He's the local guy here, and I met him, I think back in like 2011 at one of the health conferences, and I started working with him. One of the great things about really talented functional doctors, they're always digging deeper. Just because everything looks normal, they're always scratching one level deeper. And he was able to find things that actually were at the root cause. It was amazing, using things like non-conventional tests, stool tests. My GP would never order that, and he ran that, and there was an infection in the digestive tract. I'd never had a full thyroid panel, and I had thyroid issues. And organic acids, which is looking at metabolites in urine that can provide incredible clues. So he's been amazing, and there are a number of other incredibly talented functional docs that really come at it from a different perspective, and you need both perspectives, in my opinion.
And then my question, I guess, is kind of related to the previous question. I use a lot of different ways to get information, like my Withings scale, my Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Is there any potential in the future to hook up with like an Apple SDK where we can put in from Heads Up Health, getting all that information into one spot and then putting it into like an Apple Health app?
We can already integrate with Apple Health and Withings and dozens more, including thousands of medical facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is that it, Brian?
Last question.
Okay.
Hi, just a question regarding your blood tests that your mainstream doctor did and your functional doctor did. You said you had an infection in the gut, which
Yeah.
your mainstream doctor was unable to pick up. Was that because in a normal blood test that your mainstream doctor does, I would assume they would test for C-reactive protein and for elevated white blood cells, and they are signs of infection. And having an infection in the gut is quite a serious thing. So what was so different that your functional doctor picked up? And did you have any symptoms of an infection in the gut?
It's hard to say. If, in hindsight, there probably was symptoms. The infection was Klebsiella. There's all kinds of bacteria in the gut, and Klebsiella exists normally in the gut. Sometimes there's an overgrowth, H. pylori, Epstein-Barr. So my HSCRP and those numbers were actually normal. They were perfect. But it wasn't until they actually did the digestive tract testing where that actually surfaced. And that's just not something that my traditional doctor thought of ordering at the time.
So did you have any symptoms in that case then? Did you have any cramping, any pain, anything like that to show?
It's been so many years, it's hard to say. I do know that some of those GI infections actually are precursors to autoimmune disease, or at least that's what I'm told.
Right.
So I think getting rid of it was extremely helpful. I don't honestly know the connection between, there may have been some insulin resistance that I was experiencing. It was nothing serious, I'll say that for sure. And I think just knowing what it could lead to down the road was something that I think was beneficial to get rid of it.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, thanks.